HIV and AIDS still have major problems, including being the fourth leading cause of death worldwide. Access to treatment remains poor, in part due to cost. Sex education is poor, promiscuity is rampant, and transmission of HIV to babies is a serious problem. Concerns about HIV and AIDS include the cost of therapies, access to care and patient compliance, adverse events and comorbidities, the increasing seropositive pool, the development of mutation, resistance and tolerance, and vaccine development. From the public health standpoint, surveillance is vital to monitor the epidemics and to form national policies. Surveillance, testing, and screening deal with sensitive personal information and raise issues of consent, privacy, and confidentiality. Voluntary HIV testing is typically administered to individual diagnostic or clinical purposes. When it is undertaken for broader public health purposes, it is frequently referred to as screening. Certain populations, such as prisoners, pregnant women, and immigrants, are frequently targeted for HIV screening. Mandatory testing or screening involves the coercive power of the state and should be authorized only in exceptional situations or for narrow purposes such as blood donations. Anonymous HIV testing is often guaranteed in the same laws that authorize or mandate other forms of testing. For example, the prevention of mother-to-child transmission provides a strong public health justification for widespread testing based on the increased efficacy of antiretroviral drugs in controlling HIV infection and reducing mother-to-child transmission. But most policymakers and healthcare providers oppose mandatory HIV testing for pregnant women. The CDC recommends routine opt-out HIV screening for all pregnant women whose HIV status is unknown as a part of antenatal care. HIV testing must be voluntary and free from coercion, and no woman should be tested without her knowledge. When the mother's HIV status is unknown postpartum, rapid testing of the newborn as soon as possible after birth is recommended, so antiretroviral prophylaxis can be offered to HIV-exposed infants. Women should be informed that identifying HIV antibodies in the newborn indicates that the mother is infected. Interestingly, the state of New York has enacted a controversial statute for mandatory HIV testing of newborns. Disclosure of HIV information. Privacy and confidentiality protections frequently restrict the disclosure of HIV information and may provide for penalties for those who disclose HIV information without authorization. The privacy of HIV information should be protected and only disclosed under specified circumstances. Whether intentional or negligent, disclosures of HIV information constitutes a breach of privacy and may result in civil liability, criminal penalties, or other serious sanctions such as suspension of medical license. There are HIV reporting laws that require physicians and laboratories to disclose positive HIV test results to the government for public health surveillance. There are situations where there exists a physician's duty to warn that a person may have been exposed to HIV, for example, in occupational exposures or rape cases. These provisions are based on the exposed person's right to know about the risks they face and their need to take appropriate health protections. Disclosure of HIV information falls within three broad categories. One, mandatory disclosures, which I've already alluded to. Second, disclosures requiring informed consent. And the third, discretionary disclosures. Informed consent prior to disclosure promotes trust, cooperation, and transparency in the healthcare and public health systems. It reduces the likelihood of negative consequences following the disclosure. But confidentiality laws may require additional consent for subsequent disclosures to other parties. As to discretionary disclosure, state provisions grant individuals or institutions discretion to disclose HIV information without consent under specific circumstances outlined in law or policy. These provisions may vary greatly among states and apply to a range of activities such as partner notification, provision of health care, court trials, or reimbursement of insurance claims. Disclosure of HIV information for non-health purposes are controversial because they may undermine confidence in the health system, deter people from seeking testing based on privacy concerns, and may allow access to a person's HIV status in settings not governed by health information privacy laws. The majority of states in the United States have enacted HIV or AIDS-specific partner notification laws. The partner notification process encourages and sometimes obligates a person to disclose his or her HIV status to sex and or needle-sharing partners, or to take efforts to reasonably protect partners from avoidable health risks. Often, there is an ethical duty to disclose based on, number one, the obligation to do no harm to others, second, the partner's right to know, and third, the need to prevent further infection. And the person who is infected with HIV should consistently use safer sex practices, such as use of a condom. The physician's or counselor's duty to disclose a patient's HIV status to the patient's partners emanates from the legal concept of the duty to warn. In order to warn the partners of an HIV-infected patient, the physician may be authorized under the law to obtain the partners' names from the patient, to confidentially tell the partners they may be infected, and thirdly, to provide the partners with HIV counseling and access to testing and other services when available. The powers of government agencies invoke neither patient's right to know nor the practitioner's duty to warn. Instead, in partner notification or contact tracing, the public health agencies take responsibility for locating and notifying partners of HIV-infected individuals that they may have been exposed to HIV infection. Other public health policies include isolation of infected individuals and quarantine of those exposed to an infectious agent but not yet ill. This may be enforced against unwilling persons who have not committed any illegal acts in order to protect others from the disease threat they pose. Confinement of a person solely based upon their HIV status has no public health justification. Similarly, isolation based on behavioral factors is equally unjust. Laws and regulations require, number one, screening for HIV of all blood, tissue, and organs to be used for donation in humans. Many of these laws also provide for the sanitary disposal of any sample found to be HIV positive. Second, universal infection control precautions, which are intended to prevent exposure to HIV and other blood-borne pathogens in occupational or healthcare settings. Third, post-exposure prophylaxis to prevent or reduce HIV transmission, for example, for occupational HIV exposures in healthcare settings and victims of sexual assault who may be exposed to HIV by their attackers. Condom use is a critical element in a comprehensive, effective, and sustainable approach to HIV prevention. And interestingly, male circumcision reduces the risk of HIV infection by 50 to 60%.